assets, liabilities, wealth, all of the fun stuff we covered last episode. And we're going to continue to build on that foundation here, guys, as we're really working on understanding financial literacy and building into what's called financial intelligence, which we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to continue to break down lessons from the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We have another 2 lessons in store for you guys, and I have a lot of examples to go through for that stuff. So without further ado, welcome back to the Frankie D'Astoli Show. So last week, we really kicked off the finance section of the Frankie D'Astoli Show, going over some basics. So let's just do a quick recap. If you didn't listen to that episode, I highly recommend that you go back and listen to it. You're going to get kind of in a nutshell, a little like an in brief section right here, right now, that'll give you kind of just a good overview and a good basis to continue to move forward through the lessons of Rich Dad and kind of build on this foundation. But I do recommend going back and listening to that episode because we do break these down in further detail. And if you remember, if you did watch last week's episode, if you watched on video, which you can do on YouTube, I want to encourage that. I appreciate everybody that's listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of that stuff. But I do recommend that you go to the YouTube channel and you watch the video, especially for last episode. This episode, we're not doing any share screen, but last episode we did some share screen. And we went through basic accounting charts. We went through the income sheet and we went through the balance sheet. The income sheet has income and it has expenses. The balance sheet has assets and liabilities. And we covered that in depth. And that is very, very critical to understand. So if you haven't watched last week's episode or if you've listened to it, I do recommend that maybe you go try to catch it on YouTube. Also, while you're on YouTube, if you don't mind, please subscribe and feel free to like and share the show if you like it that much. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere else that you're listening on Apple Podcasts or excuse me, on podcasts in general, I'm going to ask you to please like and rate the show. If you can, give it an honest rating. If you think it's a 5, if you like my stuff, great. If you think it's a 4, I appreciate it. If you think it's a 1, please feel free to just share why you feel it's a 1. I'd appreciate that as well so I could possibly make the show better. But I don't do enough of trying to promote getting more ratings on the show. So if you could do that, I definitely appreciate it. And again, if you have any questions on any of the stuff that I covered, you can DM me at Frankie D'Astoli _REI on Instagram. That's where I am most primarily on. Instagram is definitely the most, thing that I focus on most in social media. So feel free to reach out to me there and I'll do my best to get back to you guys. But going back to last week's episode, we covered a few key topics. The first is the rich don't work for money, right? And that was lesson 1 of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book. We talked about kind of the brief of the book too. But the rich don't work for money. What does that exactly mean? It's the reversal, right? They make money work for them. So quick, example. You have a W-2 job. Let's just say you work at the grocery store. You go to the grocery store, you clock in, you have to do the work, which involves whether that's, being a manager there or that's being at the cashier's table or whatever the case might be. You literally have to trade your time in exchange for money and you get a paycheck for that. The rich don't do that, right? They buy assets and those assets work for them. Every single dollar that they put into that asset becomes a 24-hour employee, 7 days a week. It's working for them. To give you an example, they buy a house. That house has a tenant. The mortgage is $1,000. The tenant is paying $1,200. They get $200 a month from that house. And the dollars that they put into to buy that property go to work for them in regards to how that tenant pays them, right? So that's important to understand. There's a lot of other examples. They could buy stocks that have dividends, other things that we're going to talk a little bit more about that stuff today as well. The second lesson that we talked about is understanding financial literacy, the importance, right? And we really outlined that if you look up asset and you look up liability in the dictionary, it doesn't make sense, right? It's not accurate to the financial aspect. They talk about asset as something that gives you value. They talk about liability as something that you owe, I believe is what the actual definitions are, but that doesn't have any numerical value to it, right? So for instance, something that gives you value could be your golf clubs, right? If you go play golf, your golf clubs give you value, or your car can give you value because it gets you from one place to another, or your house can give you value because it shelters you. However, as Robert Kiyosaki describes in Rich Dad, those are not true assets from a numerical perspective. Sure, they give you value, but what are they doing when you look at your wallet and your spreadsheets? The numbers tell the story. That's very important to understand. So if you're home, it gives you value in the sense that it covers you, it shelters you, it's a place for you to sleep, it's a place for you to raise your family. There's definitely true value in your home. But if money is coming out of your bank account every single month to pay for your home, Kiyosaki calls this a liability. And in order to understand assets and liability, you need to look at this very black and white. There is no gray here. An asset puts money into your pocket, a liability takes money out of your pocket. We're not here to argue the actual literacy words, assets, and liabilities, but we are here to outline and define the financial literacy terms of assets and liabilities. Assets put money in your pocket, liabilities take money out of your pocket. Another term that we talked about is wealth. How is wealth truly measured? What determines wealth? And this truly is one of my favorite things that I got from Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I can say with absolute certainty, when I got into real estate investing, it was to build wealth. But the question is, what kind of wealth are you building? And for me, and what Kiyosaki talks about is it's time wealth. So basically, if you have $5,000 in your bank account and every month you have $10,000 in expenses, your time wealth is half a month, right? 15 days, call it. You could survive 15 days without making another dime. But if you have $10,000 in your bank account and you have $10,000 in expenses, you are 30 days wealthy. But if you have assets that are generating $10,000 a month and you have $10,000 in expenses, you are considered infinitely wealthy because every single month you will have enough money coming in from your assets to pay for your expenses that you won't need to work, and you will have infinite time wealth. That's important to understand. Wealth can't be determined by your W-2 job. If you have a really good job, let's just say you're a high paid accountant or a doctor or a lawyer, or you have a good job that's bringing in money, you're an engineer, whatever the case might be, yeah, you're making enough money that's covering your expenses. You're making more than that. What you're doing with that money is a second question, when that's actually what the bulk of our conversation is going to be about today for the most part. But for the most part there, you are dependent on your job. And if that job was pulled away from you, now you could look at it from a time perspective. Okay, how much time do I have? But you're not going to be infinitely wealthy because you don't have assets generating money. So let's just say you're a high paid accountant. You're making, $300,000 a year. Sure, your monthly expenses are $20,000. You have, let's just say, $100,000 in the bank. You lose that job. You lose your salary, whatever the case might be. You have $100,000 in the bank. You have $20,000 a month in expenses. What's your time wealth? It's 5 months, right? It's not infinite because you have no assets generating money. So that's very important to understand. You need to understand those specifics, right? So you have assets and liabilities. The rich don't work for money. Basic financial literacy in regards to accounting charts. And again, I very much recommend that you go back to last week's episode and look at those charts on the screen share. And then also the definition of wealth, what it actually means in regards to time wealth, right? Not wealth in the sense of, I have millions of dollars in the bank account. I don't need millions of dollars in the bank account. And that's another thing that Kiyosaki talked about and we covered last week is it's not how much you make, it's about how much you keep, right? Someone who makes $100,000 versus someone who makes $50,000, the person that makes $50,000 might have more time wealth than the person that makes $100,000. Because if you make $100,000 and you have $20,000 coming out every single month, you have 5 months. If you make $50,000 and you have $1,000 coming out every month, you have 50 months. There's a big difference there, right? So that's kind of a brief overview. Again, I highly recommend that you guys go back to that, but I hope that you guys enjoyed that episode. And again, on the Frankie D'Astoli Show, over the course of these next 12 weeks, guys, we are going to be laying the foundation for financial literacy, right? And we're going to even, crank it up a notch. We're going to get into a little bit of financial intelligence today, which is different, realm and a different beast. But the goal is to build up so that you guys, understand a little bit of the financial world around you, how money works, how to utilize it, how to look at money. And then B, start building the stepping stones for you to actually start minding your own business, which is what we're going to be talking about today in Kiyosaki's next lesson, but also start buying assets and start looking at how to position yourself to eventually achieve financial freedom. And one thing that I want to say is this is not an overnight success story, right? No one is an overnight success story. If they are, it's actually usually bad for them because if you take somebody who wins the lottery, they don't know these basic financial literacy lessons that Kiyosaki talks about in Rich Dad Poor Dad. You hear it all the time. People win the lottery. They win millions and millions of dollars and then they lose it and blow it all, right? Because they go buy a sick car, a boat, a new house, all of these things. And all of a sudden that money just starts going down and down and down. They have no stewardship over that money and then they lose it and they file for bankruptcy. And you hear this with athletes as well, right? These guys, these great professional athletes, they make a ton of money and they get absolutely crushed because they have no financial IQ, right? So we're going to get into Rich Dad's lesson 3, which is called Mind Your Own Business. And I'm going to start with a story of my old job, which I alluded to a little bit last week, how I worked for this real estate investment company. And I had left my medical device sales job to link up with this real estate investing company. And I did it because I wanted to trade time for money. As we talked about, I was making like $120 over there, 120,000. and I took relatively close to a 50% pay cut. Overall, my first year at this company, I made $78,000. My base salary was like 55K, and I had a commission pop in there that got me an extra like 23,000 for the year because we did relatively well. But still, when you look at it from that basis, big drop. I had just gotten engaged. We were planning for a wedding, a honeymoon, and I was trying to buy my first house hack. So there was a lot of money that needed to be, sprouted out. I didn't have a ton in the savings account when I made that jump because I lived the luxurious lifestyle, which we're going to talk about, but I was going, to dinners every week. I was buying, Gucci and Burberry and all of that stuff. And I was living at home. So like every dollar that was coming in, I was spending it on something. Right. But when I was at my job, my new real estate job, I was there for about 3 years, just under 3 years before I had left. And it was January of 2023. Let me think about that for a second. Was it 2023? No, it was 2024. Thank you. Where I said, I had just worked so hard. So basically, to give you a little bit of backstory, there was an issue in the company around that time period where it was May of 2023, where basically the entire sales leadership team imploded. The guys that were there couldn't get the job done. The market was definitely in a rough spot too. And there was a lot of animosity in the higher ups, and people started leaving. Other people were getting fired. And I was kind of like this one foot soldier who was just staying very focused in my Philadelphia and New Jersey markets. And I was really honing in my zone. And with all this kind of exodus of these, higher ups that were leaving, I was kind of called up to the big leagues at that point. And I had just been quote unquote promoted like very shortly before that exodus of some of those guys. But ultimately, in that moment, I had been called up, and I was excited for the opportunity. Don't get me wrong. And I was like, listen, let me quarterback this. I was like, send me to all these markets and I will get going for you. Send me to Alabama, send me to Kentucky, send me to Texas, send me to Tennessee, send me to Ohio. Get me in these markets and I will help drive the revenue. And I started doing that for the first couple of months, and it started making a huge difference. And they started basically just like riding me very, very hard to go into these markets and do that. So I was basically out every 3 out of 4 weeks. I was leaving to go, to train these reps and to get into these houses all across the US and to drive revenue. And I was doing that from basically May until my daughter was born in November. It honestly might have even been before May. I feel like this actually started in March. I apologize. This was March of 2023 all the way till November of 2023 when my daughter was born. And at that point, a new sales regime came in, a new leadership regime came in, and they didn't really know me previously for everything that I had done. And you had like the chief financial officer who was there, the chief acquisition officer, the chief ops, the CEO. They knew me and they appreciated me. And I knew that they appreciated me. They gave me a bonus of like $5,000, which like looking back on it was like nothing. I got like $3,500 after taxes, but at least it was a sign that they appreciated me. And at this point, they were hemorrhaging money, right? So I understood that it's not like the company was in a great financial position. So all this to say, I had done this, my daughter was born, and I had planned on really staking a career here. When I first came in, I was like, I'm just going to work here for a short period of time, and then eventually I'm going to leave and I'm going to start my own business. But at this point, I was like, I love it here. I love what I'm doing. But I realized the difference that it kind of made on me is I was leaving. I was gone 3 out of every 4 weeks. My wife was pregnant. And by the time my daughter came around, I realized, like, man, I don't really want to be traveling that much. But at the same time, I loved the job and I loved building and having the opportunity to build. So November, I have my daughter, and December, everything was kind of slow. It was the holidays or whatever. And January hit and I started Exodus 90, which I've talked about previously in prior podcasts, but I started Exodus 90 and I very much felt a calling from God for me to leave my job. And as I was getting this calling, I was kind of trying to discern it. And it was still the very beginning of the calling. And I was kind of like, I know that I need to be a provider for my family. And maybe a raise will give me what I need to still feel valued. And at this point, the new sales regime was in. I did not feel valued at this point. They didn't know what I did the past, 7, 8 months. They didn't hire me. So there wasn't that kind of direct connection. And I didn't necessarily feel like I felt overstepped because I was still young at that point. I was 27 years old. I'm 29 now, 26 years old, somewhere along those lines. So I felt like I still had a lot to learn before I could truly be a director of sales or even a VP of sales. And looking back on it now, I feel like I probably was ready, but I just didn't totally feel like I was at the time. So I felt that disconnect. And in kind of retaliation, I said, you know what? I'm going to ask for a raise. And I asked for the raise and I got denied. And it was truly one of the best things that could have happened to me, because if I would have got that raise, I might have still been there. And I think that's the thing. A lot of people, they want to get these raises, they want to get a promotion. But at the end of the day, what does a raise really do for you? All it does is it keeps you on the mouse wheel. It keeps you on the mouse wheel like a little mouse, running, or chasing that piece of cheese. And one raise is never going to be enough. And I remember my chief acquisition officer at this old job, who I do respect, and from a business perspective was very, very good, is really good. And he really taught me a lot. And I remember I had a rep who was like asking me for a raise or something along those lines. And it was mostly like a commission based job. So he wanted more of a raise in the base salary. And he had said to me, he was kind of like, what's that going to do for them though? At the end of the day, they're going to get that raise and they're going to come back in 6 months. They're going to want another raise. And the realities are, to answer that question, you have to either come from a perspective of, I'm going to be an employer or I'm going to be an entrepreneur, right? Because a raise is always just going to be something that you get and then you feel really good about it for a few months. And then you're going to pick up more work and you're going to say, I'm going to need another raise. And it's just that endless kind of cycle from an employee and employer perspective, right? It's like, we're going to keep giving out raises. Sure. If the person's working harder, they're taking on more responsibility. Sure, they deserve a raise. There's no doubt about that. But from your perspective, from the employee perspective, I want you to ask that question for yourself. Have you ever gone out, asked for a raise, got the raise, felt really good, and then a few months later said, I need another raise? Like, it's never ending. It will always continue to go. So what Kiyosaki talks about in this lesson 3 of Rich Dad Poor Dad is called mind your own business. Now it's kind of like a little tale on, what's the word? Twirl on words or whatever, however you kind of say that, right? It's like, you think about it in the sense of like mind your own business, like stay in your lane. But really what he's saying is mind, almost like mining, like mind your own business, build your own business out. Now, what I will say is, I built my business with my partner, Steve, and we started building it. We opened up our LLC in February. Now, I left my job in June. So it was about 4 months that we were building it. We had bought a couple houses up until that point. But for the most part, we've built our business after the fact. That's not always the best decision for a lot of people. For me, it involved a lot of risk. It was calculated risk. I had $6,000 in the bank account. There was not much there to lean back on. I had, at that point, probably about 3/4 weeks of wealth, as we talked about the description of wealth time. But overall, I just very much was doubling down on faith and understood that God was calling me to this and it was time to take that jump. And for some people, that's great. If you feel that way too, and you feel like you're being called by God, I always say, follow that calling. There's a reason that it's there. If you have the Holy Spirit in you, the Holy Spirit is guiding you. So just trust in the Holy Spirit. But for not everybody, that's necessarily the case. And even so, even if it is the case, it might just not be feasible at the time. So you have this opportunity to build that business, to mind your business while you're working your W-2. And I'm just looking at my notes here because I want to make sure I hit on the things that I'm talking about and that I want to reference here. But again, while you're working that W-2, you have the opportunity to really build your business. Promotions or bigger jobs will only get you so far. You need to use that extra money to build your business. So again, if you're going to go for that promotion, if you're going to go for that raise, that's not a bad thing. If you're working a lot, you deserve to get more money for what you're doing, sure. But don't stay on that mousetrap, that mouse wheel the entire time, just chasing and chasing and chasing. You want to say, all right, if I'm making $100,000 right now and I'm going to get a promotion and I'm going to make 110, how am I going to take that extra 10,000 and I'm going to use some of that to build my business, to start minding my business? Because if you have that, now you've opened up 2 things. You've opened up, or I should say even 3 things. You've opened up, number one, a potential for a second income stream, right? Let's just say you're selling clothes online or something, and you're building out an Etsy shop or something like that, right? Now you have the Etsy shop that you're building out. You could generate some money from that. You could put some money towards that for marketing or building out your products or whatever the case might be. Now you're generating money off that. So that's an additional stream of income. Number 2, you are also building out a security net, right? If for whatever reason you lose your job, you now have a stream of income that's at least helping you pay maybe a bill or 2, right? At that time of first, initiating the business. And then number 3 is you have something to look forward to. And a big thing that Kiyosaki talks about here is you want to make sure that the business that you're mining is something that you enjoy. don't pick up a second job here, right? And again, you might need to work within the business. Even for myself right now, my partner Steve and I for my job, what I do within our business, he's very boots on the ground. He's at the houses every day. He's managing the contractors. He's managing the renos. I manage more so the property management side. I deal with the team itself. So I work with the acquisition team. I work with our in-house property manager. I work with the accountant, the attorney, if need be, filing evictions, if it ever comes to it, making bigger decisions. That's a lot of what I do. I could do my job for the most part from anywhere, right? Yes, I go into these houses 2 times a week. I see the renos and how things are going on. But for the most part, I could do my job anywhere. Steve can't right now. However, I can't stop the job, right? Nor could he. We can't just say tomorrow, hey, we're going to go take, a 3-month trip to the Barbados, or Barbados, whatever it is, not the Barbados, but Barbados. And we're just going to, park ourselves on an island for 3 months and just kind of see how it goes. We're not at that level, right? We're still building the business. We're still mining it in order for us to get there. So even though we're not there yet, that's the goal. So when you're doing this and you're mining your business, you're building this business out, you want it to have a long-term plan for you to eventually be able to dive into that full time and love it, not hate it. So for instance, if you're building out that Etsy shop, but you absolutely hate making the products, right? Let's just say you're making, custom wood, carpentry design, but you hate wood carpentry design. You don't want to do that, right? And it's like Kiyosaki talks about, buying real estate or buying stocks or getting into something like that. You have to love what you're doing. I love real estate investing. I do. I don't want to do anything else, truthfully, from a work and occupation perspective, outside of, coaching on faith and things along those lines and bringing people back, bringing souls to Christ. Like that is what I really love to do. That's my favorite thing. Talk about buying a deal. I love buying a deal. What I love more is actually getting somebody to come back to the Catholic Church. But overall, I love what I do in real estate investing. And there's other things that I want to do. Sure, I want to buy laundromats. I want to get into maybe hotels or new construction. Those are all fun things that eventually I look down the line. But if I didn't love what I was doing right now and I left my job to do it, I'd be miserable. Would it be worth it, right? So if you're going to mind your business, make sure that you're minding something that you love, not just the second job, because you want that to be what's in front of you. You're on the mouse trap, the mouse wheel right now. You're moving. You want to look to the side and you want to say, oh, that over there is not a, mouse wheel where I'm just running around. That's where I'm relaxed and I'm enjoying my time there. And when you get that extra money from the raise, from the promotion, put it towards building that out. So eventually you could get off the wheel and you could walk over and you could relax over there, right? That's the point of what you're shooting for. If you are, in a position where you're just building a second job, you're not going to have the drive to go do that. You're going to end up staying on the wheel and just going for more raises and promotions and getting frustrated and looking for new jobs. That's the level that it's going to get to. So just want to make sure I'm covering everything in this particular section here. So budget for a portion of your pay towards building your own business. We talked about that. Build a business or require assets that you love. We talked about that. You don't want a second job. This is a big thing too that Kiyosaki talks about in this third lesson is when the assets generate enough money to buy luxury items, that's when you can buy them. A lot of people buy the luxury items first, right? The poor and the middle class buy the luxury items first, and then they buy the assets, right? Whereas the rich buy the assets first and then they buy the luxuries. And I feel like I think about this like so many times. Like I know so many people that are like, yeah, I'm going to go be a real estate agent. And because of that, because I want to do these big real estate deals, I need to look the part. So I'm going to go buy a really nice car. I'm going to go buy nice clothes and I'm going to, live this kind of lifestyle on Instagram. So people see this and then they come to me, to buy, their assets or whatever the case might be. And it's just so backwards when you think about it. It's like you're digging yourself into this hole in hopes that people give you business, right? Now take it even a step further. It's like, you're going to go and spend all of this money on certain things or whatever the case might be, and you don't have any assets to pay for that stuff. You're just digging yourself deeper in the hole. And I think one thing to really understand here is although we talk about things that put money in your pocket and things that take money out of your pocket in regards to assets and liabilities, before you buy assets, one thing that I really recommend is you invest in education, right? And there's two ways to do this. One is the way that, I kind of referred to in my own story, where I left my W-2 job and I went to it, or I should say I left my medical device sales job and I went to a real estate investment company and I took a massive pay cut, or close to a 50% pay cut, but I learned a ton. That's one way you can do it for sure. You can pay for a mentor. That's another way to do it. And I highly recommend that. Although it kind of seems almost like a liability because money's coming out of your pocket, you have to think about it from a perspective of, is this going to help bring money into my pocket through assets? And most mentors, if they're good mentors, will really help you get that done. And I've had, up until this point, I could think of 3 solid mentors who have all put money in my pocket. Now, one of those mentors I paid for. The other 2, I did something different, a seek to serve mentality. Hey, where are you in your business? You're doing something that I want to do in 5, 10 years from now. Where are you in your business and how could I bring value to your business in return for education? Right? That is a great way to find a mentor to help you really understand how to go about doing business, right? So again, you could have the seek to serve mentality or you could have the pay to play mentality, right? And both are good to use. But in regards to the, buying luxuries second, this is how the rich play it, right? So let's just kind of put a scenario in place here. You have your W-2 job. You are working that job. You get a promotion. You get a raise. You take that money and you start investing it in your own business, right? Let's just say it's real estate investing. You start taking that money and you put maybe the first $5,000 that you got towards a mentor. And the mentor teaches you a bunch of stuff. They teach you how to go out and find deals. They teach you how to analyze deals. They teach you how to come up with renovation budgets. They teach you the different investing strategies, all things we're going to be covering on the Frankie D'Astoli show, by the way. They teach you all of these things. And then you take action. You take another, $15,000, let's just say, and you partner with somebody and you go buy your first deal. And then you take that deal and you renovate it and you get it rented out and you refinance it. You do the BRRRR strategy, another thing we'll be covering probably within the next 6 weeks. And you take it and you recycle that money and you buy another house. And now all of a sudden, about 12 to 18 months, you have 5, 6, 7, 8 houses. And now you have money coming in, whether you decide to leave your W-2 job or not. You might still hold that job, which is totally fine. There's pros to holding a W-2 job, like leveraging lending, which we'll talk more about as well. When we get into kind of more lending topics, I'll have a few people on for that. But now you have these houses that are generating money. And let's just say each house generates $300 a month for you. Now you could start assigning these houses. So let's just say your wealth is infinite at this point. You make $10,000 in your asset column, and that comes from your houses. And you make, you have an outlay of $10,000 in your liability columns, right? Your maybe your car payment or whatever the case might be, your house payments, all of those things, kids schooling, X, Y, and Z. So now your wealth time is infinite because your assets are generating enough money for your expenses. So you have infinite wealth time. You are what's called FIRE, financially independent through real estate, as if you're a real estate investor. Now let's just say you have a couple more thousand coming in. So you make 12, but your expenses are 10. So you have a delta of $2,000. And let's just say it's between, 5 houses, let's say, right? So you have $400 each house. You could take those houses and you could call them your car house or your boat house or your travel house, right? And what does that mean? That means, all right, this tenant pays $2,000 a month. My mortgage is $1,600. I make $400 each month. I put aside $50, $75 for reserves every single month, just in case some things go wrong. And now I have, let's just call it $300 every single month. Well, I decided that I wanted to, travel to Spain this year. So that house is going to be my travel house. I'm going to get 2 trips out of that house every year. So that $300 that I take every month, cool. That first 6 months, that's going to get me that $1,800. I'm going to take that trip. And then the next one is another $1,800. I'm going to take it and I'm going to go to, Prague or something like that, right? That's how you could start using your assets as your luxury, ways to buy luxury items. Or if you want to buy a nice car, right? Cool. You have your car, like I do, my Chevy Equinox and my Chevy Traverse, right? 2 humble cars for my family. I don't need anything crazy. Truthfully, guys, my dream car is a Sprinter van. Right? Like I said, everybody, I want 8 kids, God willing, but as many as God gives me, I'm happy with, of course. And as many as my wife can handle, of course. I understand she's doing most of the work there. But also, my partner, Steve, he's like, oh, I want the, Mercedes coupe. And I'm like, man, I just want the Sprinter van. Right. So what I want to do is I want to have my houses be able to pay for that Sprinter van. So you get that house that you call your car house. And every single month, if it generates $300, cool. That goes in the bank. And it goes straight to an account for the car. and you save up, boom, 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 a couple of years go by, whatever the case might be, you have the down payment for the car, and then you buy the car with that house. And then that house covers that monthly payment every single month. So you have one house, one asset covering your luxury liability. And again, guys, all this is just different thought processes on how money works. You do not need to go into work every single day. You do not need to hustle for a raise and a promotion to buy that dream car. You can simply be smart, take a step back, say, is this worth me busting it to do day in, day out, spending time away from my family, more time away from my family because I'm working even harder? Or do I just put a pause here and say, how do I think smarter, not harder? How do I go buy an asset that's going to work for me, that's going to work 24/7 for me, to generate money for me so that I could use that money to buy the things that I want to buy, to spend that time with my family, to travel with my family? That's the thought process you need to have. And that's what Kiyosaki talks about in lesson 3 of Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is mind your own business. We're going to take a quick break. Let's listen to our show sponsor before we get into the next lesson. Are you a real estate investor or an aspiring real estate investor wondering, where do I get money to buy deals? I want to direct you to Renovo Financial. Now, disclaimer, I am not sponsored by Renovo. I get absolutely nothing for promoting them. I simply promote them because I believe in their loan product and I very much enjoy working with their team. I've worked with dozens of lenders over the past 2 years, buying over 40 rental properties, and I could say with absolute certainty, Renovo has been my best experience. Their team is very hands-on. They will walk you from start to finish to getting a deal done if you're brand new, or if you're an active investor, they will make sure that they get you competitive rates and will do everything they can to help you grow your portfolio. Now, there's 2 ways that you could get in touch with Renovo. Number 1, you could reach out directly to my lender, Joe Welke. His email is jwelke@Renovo Financial. You can just let him know that Frankie D'Astoli sent you and he will set you up and get you moving. Or if you want a little bit more of a soft intro, you could DM me directly at my Instagram, Frankie D'Astoli_REI. Ask for an introduction and I will put you 2 in touch. Renovo has phenomenal terms. They have a great team and they are for the investor. They will listen to your goals, which you're looking to accomplish, and they will work to be a true partner in that journey with you. All right, guys, next lesson, we're actually going to skip lesson 4. It's on taxes, which, believe me, I'm not trying to undervalue the value of that lesson. It's just, I actually would like to possibly get my accountant on the show to kind of go through that lesson and even more in depth. So I am going to save that within these, first, this kind of 12-week plan of the Frankie D'Astoli show. I will try to, configure him to step on. I had him on the show before. If you dig back in the archives of the show, you'll find it. But overall, I'll try to have him on there for that. So the next lesson we're going to talk through, and this will be the last lesson for today, and then next week we'll cover the final episodes of Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then we'll continue into kind of really getting into some of the nuts and bolts of becoming financially free. This is lesson 5, the rich invent money. And in this chapter, Robert Kiyosaki, the author, really highlights that money isn't the greatest asset. Money is simply what we determine it to be. And I want everybody to really understand that, especially if you look back to 1971, where Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. What that meant was every single dollar was backed by gold. It was backed by something physical and tangible, what's called God's money, gold. Comes from the ground. There's finite amount of gold. You can't make more gold, right? All the gold that is in the world right now. Whereas money, once Nixon did that, you could start printing money. So if you have $1 today, that's why the value of the dollar today is worth more than tomorrow. What that really means is, if I have $1 today and I could buy, let's just say, a hot dog, tomorrow I might need $1.01 to buy that hot dog. Or in 20 years from now, I might need $5 to buy that hot dog, right? It's not, that's A, that's inflationary, but also B, there's nothing backing it, right? Because you could print more money and pump more money into the market. Every single additional dollar that comes into the market devalues the dollar. But let's take it to more of a barter system type level. At the end of the day, money is just what we determine it. The green paper that has Benjamin Franklin on it is just what we determine it to be. At the end of the day, if I wanted to, let's just say I owned my house free and clear. If I said, hey, I'm going to sell my house, but I don't want money, I want gold for my house, could do that. Or let's just say, hey, you drive a Mercedes, I'll just take your car for it, right? At the end of the day, I can determine what I want for what I own. And that's the determination of money, right? Money is just what we categorize it to be. It's something of value, but tomorrow it could not be. Tomorrow, Money, paper could mean nothing, right? Something could happen catastrophic in the world that all of a sudden people aren't concerned about money. They're concerned about surviving. And what becomes valuable at that point? Water, food, shelter, things along those lines. So you got to really understand that money is what we determine it to be. It's not the greatest asset. So what is the greatest asset? It's your mind, the way you think, the way you formalize, the way you plan. Everything that is important happens up here. And if you can really dissect and understand your mind and the way to think, you will have infinite opportunities. And that's what this lesson, The Rich Invent Money, is really about. Our mind is the greatest asset, as Robert points out. And Robert actually gives a great example in this book that before I read it, I read this book. I wasn't even in real estate. And this is actually what I ended up kind of getting into. So there's a strategy called wholesaling real estate. And I'm going to break this down for everybody in lessons to come, believe me. And my whole background and history is on wholesaling real estate. Wholesaling real estate is one of the fastest and easiest ways to make money in real estate. But no one even knows it exists if you don't know about real estate investing. But the reality is, you're actually wholesaling. People wholesale all the time, right? You could wholesale at a garage sale. You could do so many things along those lines. But basically what it means is, let's just say I meet somebody that wants to sell their house for $100,000. I say, hey, I could help you sell your house for $100,000. I get it under contract and I sell the rights of that contract to an investor who wants to buy the house for $120,000. The investor buys the house for $120,000. The seller sells their home for $100,000. I make $20,000. Never once did I buy the property. Never once did I need a lender. I did not need a good credit score. I didn't even need any money in my bank account as reserves. And I made $20,000 in 30 days. That's wholesaling real estate. That's real. That happens all over the US, all over the world, probably, in my opinion. And it's real. It's literally what people do. So you invented $20,000 without putting a dime down, without signing any legal documents outside of a contract that you have with the seller on the front end and a contract with the buyer on the back end. And that's it. You invented $20,000 basically in that moment. That's how investors think. That's how you develop financial IQ. And that is why your mind is so important, because most people will look at it this way. They'll say, man, I want to buy a house. I need $20,000 to buy that house. I'm going to go work harder and I'm going to go get a promotion. Sure, you can do that. Don't get me wrong. Or you could think differently and you could say, all right, cool. How could I kill two birds with one stone here? How can I learn how to invest in real estate and make money? I could wholesale real estate. I don't need any money to do it. I don't need good credit. The barrier to entry is really low. I could just start cold calling. And if I do this well, I can make the $20,000 that I need to buy that asset that I want to buy. And I could actually learn a ton. I could talk to a lot of investors while I'm doing this, and I can get their opinion on how to buy houses and how to renovate them and how to get good tenants. And now all of a sudden you've learned a ton. You've basically paid for an education and you got paid for it. So that's one example. I'll give another example of somebody, I don't know him personally, but my lender, Joe, does know him. He told me a story about this guy. And I just said, man, that's exactly like what this guy's doing. So basically he's investing in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia has this zoning structure where basically if it's zoned RM1, it's zoned for multifamily. However, a lot of those houses are set up as single family homes. So what is he doing? He's buying the homes at a single family price. But because they're already zoned RM1, they're already zoned multifamily, he's converting them into multifamily houses. And what is this doing? This is significantly increasing the value of the home after it's fixed up, which is called your after repair value. And he's also significantly increasing the cash flow. So he's taking these houses, he's buying them as single families. He's got a whole plan on how he does it. He's got a whole system in place already because he's done it so many times. He converts them to multifamilies. He makes significantly more money on cash flow, and he cashes out a ton more money on the refinance because the appraised value is so much higher. That is a simple way. You have so many people out there that are saying there's no good deals. That's the most common thing I hear in real estate now. There's no good deals out there. You can't look at these things head on, guys. You got to try to find different angles. You need to use your mind. Stop using money. Stop putting money down at the closing table. I don't even remember the last time I put money down at the closing table. Actually, I do. The last time I put money down at the closing table was in July. I put $617 of my son's baptism money down on that table because that's what we had to come to. And in 5 months after, I got him a 20% return on it, right? And it's back in his account now. But don't put money on the table for deals. Start using your mind to figure out how to come out of pocket with nothing. or how to use other people's money to at least do it, right? So I'll give you a third example on this, and then we'll kind of move into these last two topics for that chapter. But I'll give you an example of that I did. So Steve and I, we had just started buying houses. We had one deal that we bought, and we had another one under contract. And we were doing a bunch of cold calling in the area that we were buying in. And we saw that a house that we bought, the house next to it had a lockbox on it. So we cold called the guy, we get in touch with him. It turns out he owns that house. He owns the house next to it, and he owns the house on the other side of it as well. And then he owns one about 5-10 minutes away. So we get on the phone, and initially he wants like $300,000 for the 4 houses. And I know everybody's probably like, that's absolutely nothing, but you have to understand markets, right? $300,000 for 4 houses in New Jersey or New York is going to be, obviously a home run, regardless of probably where you are for the most part. But there's certain other areas in the US, areas that we invest in, where that's actually overpriced, right? So we looked at the houses, and they needed work. They weren't also like mint condition houses. He had one tenant in one who at this point wasn't paying, and then the other 3 were vacant. So every single month he had to pay $1,700 a month in a mortgage, and he was getting no money out of this. His property manager that was running the job did an awful job. These weren't fully renovated houses. They were sitting vacant. He was paying on, his interest payments every single month, his taxes, his insurance, all of that stuff. He was getting crushed. So after talking it out with him, what we found out is we took him out for coffee. He wanted $300,000, but we said, this is not going to work for us. So we went back and forth in negotiations. And ultimately what he ended up alluding to was that he didn't want to let the properties go because there was a little bit of pride attached to him. He didn't want to feel like he was taking a loss, but he also wanted the investments long-term. He didn't want to let them go. He knew that the area was going to eventually appreciate. He just knew that these were being managed very, very poorly. So Steve and I wanted these properties, but we didn't want them at $300,000, and we didn't want to come to the table with any money either. At this point, we didn't have private money. We had just started talks with our private money lender that we mainly use now, but we weren't fully affiliated with him yet. So we knew that we would have to probably go with a hard money loan. These are all things we'll cover, guys, if you're unsure of how this stuff works, which means that we would eventually have to bring money to the table if we went with a hard money loan. But what we ended up doing is we structured this deal where we started a new LLC, and it was between the 3 of us. So it was me, Steve, and this third guy who owned the houses. We formed that new LLC, and we took his 4 houses and we refinanced them into the new LLC with a hard money loan. And that hard money loan had 2 things. It had an interest reserve account that we put aside that would pull payments from every single month so we wouldn't have to cover any holding costs. It had a renovation budget of roughly, I think it was probably about $150,000 in a renovation budget to renovate the 4 houses. And because the equity in the homes was already high enough, we didn't have to come to the table with any down payment. And on the back end, when we refinanced these and did a cash out refinance, we figured out a split where the third partner, the guy that brought the properties, would get a big chunk of that. I think it was about 65 to 70%. He would get a big chunk of that tax-free. And then he would get 20% of the net cash flow in perpetuity every single month until we determined to sell it. That is one that I'll have to probably do an entire episode on because I think it's a way that a lot of people could get into real estate investing with no money out of pocket. But what I will say, it required financial intelligence. It required thinking outside of the box. This deal was not working at $300,000 for us. How do we make it work? He had pain. He had motivation. He wanted to make these better. He wanted better operators. He was living an hour and a half out of the city that they were in, and he was getting crushed. He was paying on those houses every single month. We wanted our door count up. We wanted more cash flow coming in, but we didn't want to come out of pocket. We ended up forming a partnership, and it worked really, really well. So again, you got to think outside the box. And I kind of alluded to the term that I was going to refer to here, financial intelligence. We talked about financial literacy, but financial intelligence is really, really important. Financial intelligence gives you options. It gives you areas to move to. It's not all black and white. All of a sudden, now you start to see underneath, the surface, and you kind of have infrared glasses on. You see things other people don't see. But it takes time to develop this. That's really important to understand. It's like, think about math. At first, you just learn numbers. You learn how to count. Then you learn basic math equations, right? And as time goes on, you progress. Now you get into statistics. You start learning patterns. And now you get into, more advanced mathematic equations. That's how this works. Before you could understand truly how to tap into financial intelligence, You first need to understand the basics of financial literacy. Then you need to take action. You need to get it going. You need to work on it, use it. And that's where financial intelligence comes. And as you're building that IQ, you need to remember to have fun. And Kiyosaki talks about this in the book. This stuff has to be fun. When you have fun, you play a lot better, right? Think about if you ever played sports. If you like have a coach who you know that if you mess up, like you're going to get absolutely destroyed. Sometimes that fear could make you play a little bit better. But a lot of times, even if it does make you play a little bit better, you're not really having much fun. Whereas if you have a coach who's very motivational and he's like, yo, we're going to make this happen. We're going to go out. We're going to have a good time, but we're going to dominate. We're going to win. You usually play a lot better. You have a lot more fun. Well, you are your own coach. Remember that. Internally, you are your own coach. You make those decisions. Financial intelligence will guide you on the finance side. The Holy Spirit will guide you on the faith side. Always remember that. But outside of that, you want to, make sure you're having fun. And remember this, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, right? Steve and I have had some amazing deals happen. We've also had some bad deals that have happened. We've had some rough times in the portfolio, and I'll allude to those a little bit further as we get down the line. But overall, those are the two major lessons and takeaways from today. Mind your own business, build your business on the side as you're going about it. Make sure that you're hustling. Yeah, go. If you're getting that promotion, great. That's all good. But make sure that you're building out your business on the side, using that money to build something that you want to eventually call your safe haven that you can lean into. And then make sure that you're not, I'm sorry, remember that the rich invent money. Develop that financial intelligence that's going to base off your financial literacy and the actions that you take, and understand that you can invent money. You do not need to have physical money in your hand to make money. You know that saying, it takes money to make money? Sure, there's truth to that. I'm not saying that there's not, but a lot of times it doesn't. It actually doesn't take money to make money. It just takes you using your mind. And if you use it properly, all of a sudden money will be everywhere. Opportunities will be everywhere. So pray the rosary, buy real estate. Don't do what makes you happy. Do what makes you holy. I will see you guys next week. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. Remember, if you liked the show, please rate, please subscribe. I appreciate all of that stuff. And I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Take care.